Where are my limiting beliefs surrounding how I feel about myself stemming from? And it's a difficult question to ask yourself because it's going to put on blast your parents, your relatives, the people around you, your relationships, your exes. And it's important to recognize that they're all teachers, they're all mirrors, and not to demonize someone. And holding someone accountable is not the same as demonizing them. But it's important to really look at everything through an honest lens, and from there move forward, rewrite the story, make it a lesson rather than something that happened to you. It's something that happened for you. What is up? I hope you are well, or as well as you possibly can be given the circumstance of existing. My name is Jasmine Kylene. I'm a spiritual counselor. I'm a journalist. I am a human being doing her very best, and I'm so grateful that you are here. As a manifesting generator, I'm getting really into human design these days, and I am really in a period of hibernation and self-construction right now. And so I really am focusing on not creating for the sake of creation, but rather creating when I am inspired to say something, or when I have some sort of download or something to share. And honey, a theme that is going on really loudly in my own personal life and in my own personal practice right now is developing a healthier sense of self-worth. And I was like, we need to talk about this. We need to talk about this on a collective level, because if you are watching this around the time of upload, which you don't need to be, I think this is something that is forever evergreen and forever relevant. But if you're watching this around the time of upload, then Venus is currently retrograde in the sign of Capricorn. But I think what's really special about this transit is that it is conjoining Pluto. And girl, I think what is so important about Venus and Pluto sort of conjoining right now, I'll kind of break down what's going on astrologically and then how this has nothing to do with astrology, but rather just self-development and self-empowerment. But I think it's important to note that we are all sort of collectively learning what it means to live a life and align our actions with our sense of self-worth, and to actively unlearn whatever is threatening having a healthy sense of self-worth. And so the reason why I think the story is playing out astrologically is because Venus, above all else, above relationships and how we experience beauty and arts and creation and all of those beautiful things, it also rules what we value and how we experience what we value. And I think it's important to have a healthy relationship with what we externally value, but ultimately it's very important to have a relationship with what we internally value and how we see ourselves as valuable and worthy, and what we are using to define that worth and that value. And when Pluto conjoins this energy, right, Pluto being a planet that rules our subconscious and the things that we have learned within our upbringings that influence our subconscious thought patterns. Our conscious state has very little to do with how we create and manifest and experience our realities. Everything is derivative and born through what we are subconsciously thinking. And so Pluto is always it's a tough planet and energy to work with, but it's the most important one, because it's going to bring up what's going on in our shadows, what's going on in the back of our minds, what's going on in that autopilot. And it's ultimately going to really make obvious if something that is not in alignment with our own sense of evolution is going on in there. And so with Pluto conjoining Venus, right, these two, I would say opposite energies, but ultimately with them working in tandem, it's probably a really powerful up-leveling that is happening right now, because ultimately we're being called to ask ourselves and to look at how do we value ourselves and how are we building lives that align with that sense of self-value. But with Pluto coming in the picture, it's also recognizing what limiting beliefs do I have surrounding my sense of self-worth that are blocking calling in the relationships and the manifestations that I desire, and where did I learn these things, and how can I sort of shift the narrative. So I'll break down what this means and why this is so relevant right now. I think it's so important to note that every single thing we experience in this lifetime is directly derivative of our sense of self-worth. And I've been listening a lot to Lacy Phillips. She's the neural manifestation expert, and she's the founder of To Be Magnetic. And I've been listening to her podcast a lot, Expanded, and she talks a lot about how when we want to manifest something in our lives, when we want to manifest relationships or career accomplishments and homes and things and versions of ourselves, it is not about focusing on the thing that you are calling in, but rather your sense of self-worth and how worthy and deserving you feel of that thing. If there's any block standing in between you and the thing, it has nothing to do with thing and everything to do with how deserving you feel of it. And on a conscious level, you could think that you love yourself, but on a subconscious level, if you're still repeating a narrative that tells you that worth is conditional, or that you need to perform in order to be deserving, or that there's something you need to do in order to receive, there's something to work through there when it comes to your sense of self-worth. And so when I say that everything in our lives is derivative of our self-worth defines how we allow others to treat us. Our self-worth defines the dreams that we go after. It defines what we settle for. And ultimately, our entire reality and our experience of that reality is derivative of how deserving of a human being do you think that you are? Do you believe that you are? And what is your belief surrounding that sense of self-worth? And if you have any limiting beliefs in regards or relationship to self-worth, it's going to show up in your relationships, in your experience, in your home, in the dynamics and the cycles that play out. And I am speaking about this from I'm speaking about it alongside you. And anything that I do on this channel, or just like as a spiritual counselor, is from the lens of someone who is experiencing it alongside you, because, honey, if there's any prophet telling you that they're self-fulfilled, girl, watch out. I realize that like a lot of relational dynamics have been playing out in my life for far too long, and I'm consistently on a conscious level saying, I love myself way too enough to allow this to happen, and why does this always happen? Why do I always keep finding the same kind of partnerships? Why am I always in the same pattern? And it has taken, I think, this astrological transit, but also just like a lot that I've learned this past year, to really recognize that those patterns and those cycles are directly derivative of my belief and my sense of self-worth, and what I am telling myself I deserve, how I'm allowing that to play out, and that. I have very recently and loudly and viscerally realized that these dynamics and these patterns that I am on conscious level saying I'm so over, on a subconscious level, I'm inviting in, I am choosing, I'm allowing, because they satisfy what I have defined self-worth to be and the conditioning that I place on my self-worth, right? I am consistently thinking that my worth and my power is transactional, right? I'm consistently in a performative state when it comes to my like romantic relationships. Like I think I need to be a version of myself, the palatable, sensual, just whatever I deem the other person desires of me, I become that in order to have some sort of validation. And it's also shown up in the way that I experience social media, right? I think a lot of my worth I have allowed to be derivative of external validation, of, okay, someone liked that, someone thinks that's cool, okay, so then I'm good, I can exhale. And I think Pluto coming in, and just also if you don't want to bring the planets in this, I think just on a neuroscientific level, it's important to look at the shadow and the root of where our beliefs come from, right? Because if we are anything, it is our beliefs. If our experience is anything, it's derivative of our sense of self-worth, and our sense of self-worth is derivative of our belief system. And so it's really important to look at the subconscious stories that you are telling yourself and where those stories stemmed from, what seeds have been planted from day one, whether it's from your childhood, your upbringing, societal conditioning, media messaging, experience with rejection that you've gotten before. I think I've really been digging deep, and I think when I reflect, I can find several different sources of where I've been conditioned to think that my worth should be performed or validated, and I think it comes from paternal stuff, I think it comes from like bullying, I think it comes from different experiences of rejection, but ultimately it's important to look at those things, understand that you can't unlive them, right? I think we can get so obsessed with healing that all we do is hyper-focus on the wound, and if you consistently pick at a scab and dissect the scab, understand the scab, look at the scab, make your entire identity the scab can't scab over naturally, and then you just kind of never heal, you just become your wound. And so I think it's important to note that like you can't erase, or I don't know, healing is not equated to erasing the experience, but healing is understanding it, taking the nectar from it, taking whatever tools and lessons that you can, validating yourself, validating your experience, holding whoever needs to be accountable, but ultimately understanding that it is something that happened. You will always be in the timeline and the reality in which it happened, and you can shift your focus. You don't have to look at it all the time and become your wound. You can look at it and say, okay, I'm gonna take this from it, I'm gonna leave that, and I'm gonna move on. And I think it's important in this specific period of healing to recognize where did I learn, what situation and what messaging taught me whatever limiting belief and relationship to my self-worth, whatever that is, How can I look at it? How can I acknowledge it? How can I recognize that it's part of my story and it's left some sort of scar? And then move on and rewrite that narrative, right? I think rewriting the narrative looks like, for instance, I don't know, I was rejected by a lot of I had a weird middle school experience. The second half of it was cool. The first half of it was not cool. And I think for a very long time, I allowed my experience with rejection and bullying to define how I experienced my own sense of self-worth, which is that I need to become something in order to be accepted. I need to be a version of myself. I need to be palatable, digestible. I need to be whatever is desired of me always. And I think that has disconnected me a lot from a sense of authenticity, a sense of radically loving who I am authentically. And when I reflect back on that situation now, nothing has changed about it. It will always be something that happened, and I'm sure there will always be some sort of pain or trigger related to it. But it's recognizing the fact that that situation was such a catalyst in me realizing that every single person and every single human that you share this earthly existence with is mirroring something to you in some kind of way. And if you trigger or mirror something to them that they are uncomfortable with, there's going to be some blowback and there's going to be some defense. And I think I probably mirrored to a lot of people at that time what they were uncomfortable with within themselves. And I think instead of sitting with that, they were kind of too young to understand what sitting with that even is. And so they took anger and aggression as a way to cope with it, and that's fine. But I think also it also just strengthened how loudly I show up in my authenticity now, because I know what it has felt like for it to be rejected or muted. And so there's a lot of nectar that I took from that situation, and even though it's something that still happened, it can never not happen, I can never unlive it, I can use that scar, that experience, to be a tool for how I stand more loudly in my authenticity and more loudly in my sense of self-worth, rather something that hinders me. So I think for a long time, subconsciously, I was experiencing that as something that told me I wasn't worthy. And now I have molded it to be a situation that has taught me to be someone who radically honors their sense of self-worth and their authenticity. So look at what you experience, what situation has happened that has taught you a limiting belief surrounding your sense of self-worth, whether it told you that your body needed to look a certain way, that you needed to act a certain way, that you needed to express your identity sexually, physically, emotionally in a certain way. And even, of course, this bleeds into, I think we are our own sort of self-investment, and so how we feel about ourselves and our relationships also mirror how we experience and feel about money. And so if there's any limiting beliefs surrounding your worth and how you can tax it, and abundance and money and how that's defined and what you need to do in order to have it, it's important to unlearn that as well, because Venus rules the sign of Taurus, and Taurus is everything to do with financial comfort. And so if you think that there's any reason why you should forfeit being financially abundant, or if you think that you need to exert a certain amount of effort in order to be worthy or deserving or in relationship with money, unlearn that. Who taught you that, babe? And I think what's most important to bring up here, and this is something that I'm really working on right now, is recognizing that to be in radical defense of your sense of self-worth, and not defense to the point where you think it's being attacked, but rather to live a life that is aggressively loud with how well you love yourself and how deeply you have a sense of self-worth. I think the most important thing you can do for yourself is say no. The most important thing you can do for yourself is have really stern and loud boundaries. I think that anyone who pushes back on you implementing a new boundary is someone who benefits from you not having a boundary. I read that one time and I was like, T. And so it's very important that on this journey of redefining your sense of self-worth, of looking at the limiting beliefs that stem from you having any kind of broken sense of self-worth, that you implement new boundaries that honor what you have learned about your new sense of self-worth. So if you realize that you've been a doormat in a lot of situations in your life, right? You've been people-pleasing because people-pleasing is how you define your sense of self-worth, or overworking is how you define your sense of self-worth, or just getting validation on social media is how you define your sense of self-worth. Whatever a boundary looks like in that area that you've never been brave enough to implement now, implementing that is going to be the strongest way that you sharpen your vibration, that you change your frequency, and that you communicate to the universe, I value myself and I see myself as worthy. And not only communicating that to the universe, but also communicating that to the people in your life and sort of teaching them the way to experience you and the way to honor you and the way to respect you, which in itself is the most radical thing you can do for your sense of self-worth, truly. So if you are someone who struggles with boundaries, samesies, but I think all of this will come naturally and easy if you really ground yourself in whatever mantra you can derive from the limiting beliefs that you are releasing now. So for instance, I'm really coming to terms with the fact that a lot of my sense of self-worth was externally derived. I think if men thought I was hot and people on social media thought I was smart, and like if whatever audience I was catering to told me you did it, you're good enough, then I could exhale and feel good enough. And so I'm really working on recognizing the fact that just by being I am worthy, and that my self-worth is derivative innately, that my self-worth is derived innately. And so the mantra that I have sort of like squeezed out of that knowing and that download is I am innately worthy. And so I have kind of been filtering every decision and every action that I make through that lens. Really, I'm doing that a lot right now until it eventually becomes organic and natural. That's kind of how you do this whole thing. But every decision that I make, every picture that I post, every yes that I say, and every no that I say, I'm coming back to, does this honor the knowing and the truth that I am innately worthy? And if I'm doing something that I know is just to make sure I'm getting validated externally, I'll check in with that mantra and say, oh, no, hun, that's not honoring the new truth we said we believe in. And I'm making sure that I am my beliefs, and that my choices are my beliefs, and that I'm aligning my action with my beliefs. So when it comes to implementing new boundaries in your life, to stepping into this new era of self, to really navigating this Venus retrograde, come back to whatever mantra you want to make from what you are realizing your limiting beliefs are surrounding your sense of self-worth, and make sure that you filter all your decisions, all your actions through that lens. In order to get that mantra, really look at where are my limiting beliefs surrounding how I feel about myself stemming from. And it's a difficult question to ask yourself because it's going to put on blast your parents, you know, your relatives, the people around you, your relationships, your exes. And it's important to recognize that they're all teachers, they're all mirrors, and not to demonize someone. And holding someone accountable is not the same as demonizing them, but it's important to really look at everything through an honest lens, and from there move forward, rewrite the story, make it a lesson rather than something that happened to you. You know, it's something that happened for you, and ultimately choose now how you're going to alchemize that and how you're going to integrate that shadow into how you stand in your power. Because I think it's understanding why a wound happened to you, and taking the juice and the nectar from that wound and turning it into how you use it as a resource, how you use it as a leveling up of empowerment and self, that we really master self, right? When we make our shadow, when we take the shame away from our shadow and we integrate it into how we stand in our light, we are completely self-mastered. And it's also worth noting that self-mastery is recognizing that you will constantly be in a state of evolution and rebirth, right? And that like, you're always gonna be healing, so might as well just like vibe, you know what I mean? But I just ultimately, I hope that you look at all the things that you are calling into your life, experiencing in your life, and you're able to boil and bubble it down into how you feel about yourself and what you are communicating to the world, to the universe, to the people around you that you think you are deserving of. Really look at the cycles, the patterns, the things in your life that are really loud right now, and look at how it can somehow connect to your sense of self-worth, what you feel about yourself, what you believe about yourself, what conditioning you believe surrounds your sense of self-worth, and ultimately how you are now going to take your power back and redefine it and rewrite the story. So yeah, I hope that that resonated and made sense. It's kind of something that's really loud in my life right now, and I'm grateful for it because I think this is going to birth a new era of self, and it's a self that I've been waiting to become. So I'm excited to meet her. But otherwise, I'm sending you all my love. I hope that you are well. If you feel called to, I do one-on-ones if you want to look into your chart or anything like that. I'm gonna go see Spider-Man, which is cute because I have a little spider ring right now. But yeah, follow me on Instagram if you feel called to once again, subscribe on YouTube, all of the things, and I'll see you next time.